Hello, YouTube, and welcome to the April 20th edition of the Weekly Touchdown. The draft is 7 days away. Next Thursday will be the first round. Today we're going to look at the AFC East and West, see what their draft picks are, what their needs are, and where we think they're going to be falling with things. We'll start out with the AFC East. The first team we want to look at there is the New York Jets. They have 7 picks, and their first pick is going to be number 6. Their record last season was 5-11, with their top needs being quarterback, outside linebacker, and cornerback. The Jets' problem at quarterback is well known. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Geno Smith, the great Mark Sanchez, and his classic butt fumble. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, look for it on YouTube, folks. It's hilarious. But they signed Josh McCown as a filler, I guess is the best way to put it. Josh McCown played at the Browns, or tried to play with the Browns last year, didn't make it through the first game, and came back, and I think he played one other game and got injured again. He's somebody that can fill in, and that's about it. So they're going to have to get him a quarterback in this draft because McCown just isn't the answer long term. They have a pretty talented line, so they're not really worried about offensive or defensive line. They have a need at outside linebacker and at cornerback. Now, if you follow the Jets, you're going to maybe wonder why I say cornerback, because they did sign Morris Claiborne from the Cowboys as a cornerback. The problem is they need 2 of them. So you got one, and it is a really good one, but like a lot of teams that have a really good corner and nobody on the other side, that just means they stack the other side away from your top corner. So you need somebody that can fill in on that other side. I expect those issues to be addressed pretty quickly in the draft for the Jets. The next team I want to look at is the Buffalo Bills. The Bills have 6 picks, and their first pick is the number 10 pick. Their record was 7-9 last year, and they have needs at defensive back, wide receiver, and offensive tackle. Defensive back is going to be their number 1 need. They lost Stephon Gilmore, so that is going to be a huge issue for them to bring in a corner to replace him, and they also need I believe it's free safety. They've got a need at safety as well. They're still looking for a right tackle. The question is, with that number 10 pick, do they go wide receiver? Do they go defensive back? Do they go and try to get a tackle? And I'm really kind of torn with this. I don't think they're going to go tackle because none of the tackles I've been looking at, I don't think any of them rate in the top 10, but they're going to have to address those needs if they want to move forward. The Miami Dolphins is the third team in the AFC East that I want to mention very briefly. They've got 8 picks. Their first pick is number 22. They have a record of 10-6, and their top needs are linebacker, offensive guard, and cornerback. They did bring in Lawrence Timmons from Pittsburgh, which is going to help them at linebacker, but they still need to shore that position up. They need some depth on the offensive line. Their guards are good, but they don't have any rotation players in there, and they're going to have to get some young guys to bring in on their cornerbacks as the roster fillers in there. This is going to be an interesting situation for the Dolphins because they're one of those teams that are almost there. And if they get 1 or 2 pieces to fall into place for them, I think they're going to surprise a lot of people next year. But the question is, can they get those 1 or 2 places to fall in to help them take that next step forward? Lastly, the final team in the AFC East is the New England Patriots, 7 picks. No picks in the first round, though. They did have the number 32 pick. They did trade that to the New Orleans Saints to acquire wide receiver Brandon Cooks. Their top needs are offensive tackle, linebacker, and running back. They're going to have to bring in a tackle at some point. It's not a major issue for them. They need some help in the linebacker position. They lost, I believe it was Hightower, Jamie Collins, so their starting linebackers, they need to put some depth in there. And they're going to need to find a running back like Garrett Blount. We're still not sure what the situation is with him. I'm going to tell you, I was having this conversation actually with my wife just a few minutes ago about the draft. Do you draft best player on the board, or you draft by need? And GMs argue back and forth on this. Pundits argue back and forth. Do you draft the best player, or do you draft based off need? Once again, folks, I'm a nobody. I'm just a fan. But I wonder this idea of drafting best player available. If it's not a need for your team, what are you doing with it? And even though I'm not a great fan of the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick, the coach, is a master at drafting and signing based off a team need. He doesn't look at the free agent board. He doesn't look at the draft board and go, I've got Jimmy Garoppolo, I've got Tom Brady, I'm going to draft a quarterback because that's the best player on the board. He drafts what he needs to make his team better. And to see how well that works, look at the history of the New England Patriots, how consistently they have been at the top since Bill Belichick has been the coach there. I think if you want an argument about which is the better philosophy to look at, take a look at New England, who drafts based off of need, not best position available. Switching over to the AFC West, the first one I'm going to have to get really hard to get used to saying because it does not sound right to me. It is the Los Angeles Chargers. Let me say that again, the Los Angeles Chargers. Not San Diego, Los Angeles. And if you watch any of my podcasts as we go through the rest of the season, I'm sure I'm going to stumble over that because that just does not sound right to me. They have 7 picks. Their first pick is the number 7 pick, and they had a record of 5-11. And 11. They have a need at wide receiver, defensive end, and also at offensive guard. Keenan Allen was their wide receiver and their number 1 wide receiver last year, but he got hurt again. I think that's his 3rd or 4th consecutive season with a injury that makes him lose playing time. You can't have that as a wide receiver. So they're going to have to get a wide receiver to move into that number 1 spot. They also need some depth on offensive guard. I think it's their left guard just was a fill-in last year, and they need to address that issue. Defensive end, the reason they need to really target defensive ends is they are switching from a 3-4 to a 4-3. Let me quickly explain what that is. You've got 11 players on either side of the ball. Okay, on the defense, you have, if it's a 4-3, you have 4 down defensive linemen. You have a defensive end, defensive tackle, defensive end, 3 linebackers behind them. Outside linebacker, middle linebacker, outside linebacker. And then you have 2 corners and 2 safeties. The corners are on the outside, safeties are in the middle. That's how the defense is set up. If you have a 3-4, you have a defensive end, defensive tackle. Then you have an outside linebacker, and 2 inside linebackers. Some of these guys, like the outside linebackers, if you go from a 3-4 to a 4-3, can move from defensive end to outside linebacker. It's based off their skill set, their size, and stuff. But if you don't have a good outside linebacker and you make that shift, then you have to bring somebody in. So them switching to a 4-3 with 4 down linemen means they're going to bring in another defensive end. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll take what they call a bookend defensive end and move him into defensive tackle, and you want to bring in a speed rusher to take the place for that extra outside linebacker. A lot of technicality goes into how you decide where those people are going to play, but they're going to need another defensive end to rush the passer and contain the run out there. So look for the Chargers to be addressing that issue pretty quickly. The Denver Broncos have 10 picks. Their first pick is number 20. They had a record of 9-7. Their top needs are offensive tackle, inside linebacker, and defensive end. They've got to bring in an offensive tackle. We saw a huge drop in production from the Super Bowl winning year of 2015 to last year, 2016. So I think that's one issue they're going to have to deal with. They're going to have to bring in another inside linebacker to help balance out that the linebacker core there. And they need a defensive end to put opposite of Derek Wolfe. They got to have some balance in there. Once again, what will happen if you've got a really good defensive end on, for example, the right side and a mediocre one on the left side? What the offenses will do is they will put an extra blocker in there. They'll put the tight end over on the stronger defensive end. When they need pass protection, they'll put the running back, on that side to help chip that stronger defensive end. So you got to have some balance there, and I think that's what they're going to be dealing with there. Denver has 4 selections in the first 3 rounds, which is going to be a good opportunity for them to address these issues. They got a 3rd round compensatory pick for letting one of their free agents go in the offseason. So at the end of the 3rd round, they will get an additional pick after their regular 3rd round pick. The Oakland Raiders have 8 picks. Their first pick is going to be 24th because they ended up with a record of 12-4. They have needs at middle linebacker, defensive tackle, and cornerback. They signed a cornerback in the offseason, but I think that's not really going to help them. They're going to have to get some help at corner, and this cornerback class is one of the deepest I've seen in probably the last 10-15 years in the NFL draft, so I think they can do that. They need to also shore up that offensive line. You want to have a solid starting five on that offensive line, but you need rotational guys that you can put in there to spell the guys, give them a break, or if somebody gets injured. And they also need to get another defensive tackle. You need a pass rusher and a run stopper if you're running a 4-3. They also need to address middle linebacker. Khalil Mack, outside linebacker, I just saw they exercised a fifth-year option on him, so he's going to be around. I would be surprised if he goes anywhere. When they drafted him a few years ago, I knew they were getting a steal. He played at University of Buffalo. I watched him play against Ohio State, and he was schooling Ohio State. I mean, he's a phenomenal player, and I figure he's going to stay in a Raiders uniform, whether it's Oakland, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, wherever they end up at. Last team in the AFC West is the Kansas City Chiefs, also with a record of 12-4. They have 10 picks, and they are picking 27. They're also a team that picked up a compensatory draft at the end of the third round to make up for losing one of their star players. Their top needs are inside linebacker, defensive line, and cornerback. You notice I didn't say anything about the offense. Kansas City's offense was awesome. They've got a great offensive line. They've got Aaron Smith as quarterback, or Alex Smith, excuse me. They've got a solid offense. They know how to take care of that side of the ball. Defense is another issue. You notice I said defensive line, inside linebacker, and cornerback. They've got to address those issues. Derek Johnson is an inside linebacker, does a phenomenal job for them, but they need somebody else to give him some help. They need to get rotation guys on the defensive line. One of the GMs I was listening to the other day said even though he runs a 4-3, he has 9 defensive linemen that he rotates in to keep these guys fresh. So it just shows how much depth you've got to have at that defensive line position. Even though you may only have 4 starters, you have enough to rotate them in constantly. And they also need to address their issues in the secondary. Another team that's got a really strong corner on one side, a weaker one on the other, and offenses take advantage of that. So I look to see them address those kind of issues as well. When we get into those picks from 25 onward, you're really seeing teams start to address what we call needs. You're not looking at who's the best one on there, and that's where we start to see some of the ins and outs of the game and some of the strategy for draft planners, general managers, the draft teams analysis they put together, analysts they put together on the teams come into play on that. So that's what I see happening with those teams. I think we're going to see in some of those picks in the 20s, you may see some trades going on there. I want to talk about a couple I think may happen, dealing with the NFC East especially, to move out of those picks in the 20s to try to jump up, and the tactics that go into the draft. I'll go into that a little bit more when we do the draft special on the first 10 picks on Sunday. But folks, that's the AFC East and West. I hope you like what I did with this. As I've said before, if you have questions, answer them. I'll be happy to or ask them. I'll get this right one of these days. Ask them, and I'll be happy to try to answer them for you. I hope that you are following along with this, and it helps explain a little bit of what happens with the NFL for you. If you have not done so, subscribe so you can see when I'm putting thing out. If you like what I've done with this thing, you like the way I'm describing this stuff, go ahead and give me a like down there. If you don't like it, tell me why. Tell me what you want me to do to make it better. If you just think I'm boring and I shouldn't address this kind of stuff, then tell me, hey, liven it up a little bit. This is all something that's kind of new to me, but I love talking about the NFL. I love watching American football, and I hope that I'm helping you understand a little bit more. I'm a teacher by trade, and I swear that sometimes I cannot say words properly whatsoever. But that's all good. We're having fun. We're enjoying it. I hope you all are as well. But either way it goes, I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.